Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of HSP TV. I am your host, Barbara, and today I'm joined by the wonderful Claudia Tressel, and we are going to be talking about a very important topic, and that is how your most challenging relationship can become your greatest teacher. And I know a lot of us have at least one and oftentimes more challenging relationships. And I've been getting lots of questions on how to deal with that and what it means also when you're growing. So I've been really looking forward to this talk, Claudia, and I'm very grateful that you're here today.
Thank you so much, Barbara. I'm so happy to be here, and it's lovely to share with you as always. And I'm happy to share my experience, may it help somebody else where they're at, and shed a bit of light on it and make their suffering maybe a little bit less. If that's done, then I can ask for no more.
Yes, you are a beautiful soul, and that is exactly also why I started this channel and why I'm doing these heart-to-heart conversations, right? Because we all know that the things that we go through, we're not the only ones going through these things.
Mhm.
And when I was going through lots of things, there wasn't anything out there. There wasn't information, and times have changed, and
Yeah.
life has changed, and the idea behind this channel and also our talk today is indeed to show people that they're not alone in going through certain things and
Mhm.
that there is a way through it or a way forward or a way of handling things. And yeah, I'm very grateful that you want to come and talk about your experience because yeah, we haven't really talked about the experience itself, but I know from personal experiences that it's not easy dealing with a challenging relationship.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and I can very much relate to what you were saying. It was my situation as well that I felt incredibly alone in this situation, especially as having been a newly immigrated person. At the
Mhm.
time, I immigrated from Germany, where I grew up, to Canada, and found myself in the situation to expect a child with somebody I knew very little. It was kind of like one of those jump head over heels in and see, oh, now what are we going to do? So I was very committed to doing that. But as some of you might guess, it turned out to be a lot more challenging than I expected. And it threw me into a really huge dark night of the soul, really, if that term, like challenged beyond what I could handle. That was brought on by things like the obvious lack of sleep as a new mother, and my little one was a very hungry guy. He liked to nurse every 2 hours and not a lot of sleep in between. So by the time he was about 5 to 6 months old, I was at my wit's end and things became really challenging for me. And that's when things really started to go wild, to say the
Yeah,
very.
I can imagine, and correct me if I'm mistaken, but I sort of seem to remember that it wasn't planned, right? The
No,
pregnancy, it just
no,
it
it was not
happened.
planned. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's, I think if you ask around, that's actually how a lot of us are conceived, or a lot of people conceive their children. Not all, some people are lucky to plan and it actually happens what they're planning. In my case, it wasn't the case. And needless to say, now I'm very happy to have my son in my life. He's the best thing that ever happened to me. He's now a grown up 23-year-old, but beautiful young man. And at the time, I was happy to have him. I always wanted to be a mother. I knew that. However, the circumstances were really challenging, and I felt really alone. I was here in Canada, and I haven't yet made really deep relationships, those kind of bonds where you can show up at your worst and you can just say, help, I need help, and I don't know what's going on. I didn't have those connections yet. And so In defense, my son's dad was also really overwhelmed. That wasn't something he had planned either. And
Oh.
we turned out to be very different people. And we're both really triggered in our fears. And what I've learned, I've always been somebody that lived in a very spiritual life. And
Mhm.
I realized at the time what can happen when you are becoming a mother, and especially when you don't have your own needs met. All those things you haven't worked through yet from your own childhood, from your own growing up, or whatever is in front of you, it will come up, or it can come up. I shouldn't say it will, because for some people it's different, but it has the potential to come up double.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
for me, that was very much the case, that it brought up everything that wasn't resolved. My own inner childhood wounds were like screaming in my face. And I could see in hindsight, I can see it now, the same happened for my son's dad. And we were just really, really challenged. And
Mhm.
so much fear, so little knowing what to do, who to turn to, and
Mhm.
really challenging in how to communicate what we really need. Yeah, there was just a lot of overwhelm altogether, really.
I can imagine. And were you planning to get married, or were you already married and then it became unexpected, the pregnancy? Or were you in the beginning phases of a relationship, just in the verge of getting to know each other, and all of a sudden pregnant, and oh,
Yeah,
then maybe we should get married type of situation?
yeah, it was very much like that. We barely knew each other. We were very much in the beginning phases, and
Mhm.
in hindsight, again, my intuition knew right there and then that we were not meant to be together. However, there was some reason why we stayed together. Obviously, my son wanted to come to this planet and has chosen both of us as his parents. So everything is perfect in the end. But at the time, it was very confusing and challenging.
I can
And
imagine.
we did end up, because I was not legally immigrated at the time. In order for me to be able to stay here, we chose to go the route and get legally married so I could stay in the country. Um, it was a very challenging way because until the very end, just before my son was born, I wasn't even sure if my immigration was accepted or not. So there was a
Mhm.
lot of pressure even before he was born that was on us, and financial, right? I didn't have medical coverage yet. And there's just so many things that happened. And as young people, we were just kind of looking forward, what is the next thing and the next thing and the next thing to do. And then when my son was born, it's like, okay, now I realized there's no way back. So that was a big factor for me that really sank in and terrified me, the feeling of being stuck. I realized even if this doesn't work out, I can't just go back home. What
No,
that means,
you're talking about a lot of factors that play a
yeah,
part, right? Because, like you said, you were new in Canada. You were not
that's
born
right.
and raised there,
No,
so you obviously don't have family there, and
that's right.
probably also not friends, or maybe one, but the support system is
Hmm.
missing. You're in the beginning stages of a relationship with someone you're not even sure about wanting to be
Hmm.
together for
Hmm.
the rest of your life. So all
Hmm.
these things are already doing a lot with your emotions and what's going on. And then all of a sudden you find yourself pregnant. And
Hmm.
in order to stay in the country and also to have health care when your child was born, you then decide to marry. So on the one hand, he was a great enough guy to not leave you hanging, to not run
Hmm.
away. He took his
Yes.
responsibility, but that's
Yes.
not the ideal circumstances of starting something long term together, right?
Hmm.
So I can
Yeah.
imagine that for both of you, that's very challenging. And then the uncertainty, the stress, on
Hmm.
on top
Hmm.
of, I think, your first pregnancy, with
Yes.
knowing what to
Yes.
expect from a
Hmm.
pregnancy, your
Hmm.
hormones changing, your body changing.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
for
there's
sure.
so much together
Hmm.
already right
Hmm.
there.
Hmm. Yeah, and for me too, it was interesting for me to find myself feeling so uncertain because in Germany I was working as a doctor's assistant. That was my career. And for a good number of years, I worked alongside a pediatrician. So I was very comfortable around babies. I was seeing people in their pregnancy, and I studied a lot about medicine myself. So all those aspects I felt really comfortable and confident about. But what had happened for me is the years leading up to moving to Canada, I've really found my love for natural medicine. I've really found my understanding of just how powerful the body is. And then when I came to Canada, I realized that people don't know me as that person. Back home, I was the person that everybody came to for advice. What should I do? I worked for a homeopath, classical homeopath, wonderful effects and wonderful outcomes. And here, when I told people about this, it was almost like they shrugged it off, like, that's nothing, or they don't believe me, or they felt like that's not really a thing. So I found myself almost in this kind of like weird place, like I've landed in the wrong movie. Where am I? Whose life is that even that I'm landed in? And as my son was born, I remember doctors being really pushy about certain things that I was like, no way, no doctor that I knew in Germany would suggest this. This is not okay. And they brushed me off as somebody who's unreasonable. So it just kept on coming from every side. And as my as my stress progressed, I remember people around me pushing for saying you need to go get antidepressant, you need to be medicated, and I'm like, heck no. And I'm not saying that is never the case. There's some people, there is something they need support going on, but I knew that really deeply for myself. That was not a route I wanted to go, and I needed to not go that way. It was like on every level, I knew that was not the case. And I got a lot of pushback from friends, or the friends that I had so far that weren't super close. My husband, the father of my child, and his family, they were very mainstream in that way too, and they were not always agreeing with some of the ways I took care of my son and or of our son. And there was often a bit of a challenge going on. And even my family doctor was really pushing me, and to the point where I actually had to leave her practice and go seek out another one because I did not feel like she was supporting me properly. She had an agenda, and she treated me very condescending in the way she was talking to me about what I was going through. But however, I was not somebody to just brush it off and do nothing. I've always done what I could, and I remember looking in all kinds of places. What can I do? How can I take care of myself? And what I found was available. There was some courses on how to take care of yourself, and one of the things that became like a really big inspiration for me to really seek everywhere was the fact that by the time, yeah, like I said, about 5, 6 months, I was really worn out. And through that worn out, the emotion that came up for me more than anything was despair, but also rage. And that's, if my younger self would hear me say that right now, she would shudder, because rage and anger was something I've pushed away with my all my might. Like there's no way I would have allowed myself to have rage in my life. And it was just something that wasn't going to happen. I did not associate with that. I didn't want it in my life. It was a no kind of thing. And the reason for that is I've experienced some stuff, growing up. There was an uncle that lived in our house who was an alcoholic, and when he drank, he got really angry. So that was really scary. And as a very young person, I decided I want nothing to do with that. Anger, no thank you. I'm not an angry person. And we all know how that goes. Anger is a primal emotion. You can't just say it's not for me. It's not a part of me. It's very much a part of everybody, and sometimes it's necessary because it's our indicator saying that something's not right. This is how boundaries are crossed, or my needs aren't met. I need to speak up for myself. If I look at my little doggy, when she doesn't get what she wants, she's a bit milder now, she's old, but when she was younger, everybody knew, you don't cross her boundaries. When she doesn't want something, she'll let you know very, very strongly, and that's healthy, you know. So for me, the rage was one that came forth in ways that scared me a lot. Like it would be like my whole life would depend on my son having a nap. You know, it would feel like that silly thought, but it was like so intense to like, and of course, children are connected to our energy field, right? If he ends up not if he ends up feeling the stress that I have, then of course he will be uh tense and say, well, why can't I, well, what's going on? Like, I don't think I should sleep. This isn't okay. So he ended up, yeah, having a lot of trouble sleeping, and I was grinding down, you know. So sometimes I felt so stressed out. I felt so anxious and so angry that I felt like, oh my God, I need to do something. There's no way my child can, I don't want to ever lose control and have this come out in a way to my child that the way I don't want to, right? And he doesn't deserve any of that, none of that. So it was interesting because I was running far and low everywhere to find out what can I do about this, right? And there was some courses I was taking with the mental health clinics here in town. They were free, and then it was a lot of different stuff. I didn't get really to the point of it. I found something else that eventually helped me. It was more like a yoga breath with the breath into the belly and release breath. And then there was a method my friend had channeled that was called sacred movement, and it was about expressing, allowing the body to show you something that isn't right and allowing it to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and to the point where sometimes I ended up being in a place of just shouting and stomping and screaming like a 2-year-old, really like a temper tantrum from a 2-year-old. And it was such an incredible release, and it just helped to understand what really needed to come out of me probably for 30 years prior, you know. And having had the support of there was another place I could go to. It was at a local thing at the hospital that people could come in and drop in, and there was like an open discussion about all kinds of mental health things. And I found that really interesting, and I would drop in and out of there when I was able to. And it was really helpful for me to have at least um, somewhat of a framework for what I believed was right. You know, not the medical pushing. That was still something I had to push away a lot until one day it ended up being where I felt so pushed to the edges. And it was actually on my 30th birthday. My partner, my husband, woke up being cranky at me. I felt the most alone I've ever felt in my entire life. And I felt severely suicidal. I felt like I just can't do this anymore. And somehow in my mind, I felt like if I wasn't here any longer, it might be easier for my child, which is obviously depression speaking, overwhelmed speaking, panic speaking. And I knew that that was a time I needed to seek help. So I spoke to some of the um, nurses I knew through those groups. And I remember going there once, and one of them suggested, um, how how would it be if you just stay for a few nights in the hospital to sleep, you know, just to catch up on sleep. And there was definitely a fear of the stigma of being in a mental department of the hospital that has huge stigma. But I ended up resisting it first, and then it grew on me, and like, that is a fabulous idea. I need to do this. I really need to do this. And I ended up staying there for 2 nights. It was challenging, very painful, because my son's dad took my son for the time, and he felt embarrassed to come because somebody might recognize him. And it was really painful, you know, that to the person I really needed to help me, support me, was unable to do so, wasn't willing to bring my son. And eventually he did, but he was really uncomfortable and he hated it. And yeah, there was a lot more going on. The beauty of that situation was that because I was considered to be in crisis, I was fast forwarded to see a psychiatrist at the time. And the psychiatrist was like, to me, I think that was the key point of turning things around. I had a really beautiful conversation with her. I told her what my beliefs are, that I don't believe in antidepressants, that I believe when there's something to be worked out, it needs to be worked out. And she said, yeah, you're absolutely right. She said, there's nothing wrong with how you feel. Everybody would feel this way. If they were sleep deprived, if they had financial challenges, they didn't have support, they just became a new mother with no support system, that's exactly normal how to feel that way. Right?
And how
And
great is it that someone validates that
oh my
what you're
gosh,
feeling is
I felt
normal?
like finally there was this morsel of reality again in this trippy, weird movie I was in. Like, yeah, this is the reality I remember. Yes, that's exactly it. And so with that, it felt like I was able to turn around and say, you know what? No, all of you who are trying to project that onto me, now go away. Yeah, it gave me some support in that for sure. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, the things that stood out while you were talking, what I was really feeling is the loneliness, the being
Yeah.
alone in everything, and
Hmm.
no or not enough support from your
Yeah.
partner,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
from his family, your family being far
Hmm.
away, no close
Yeah.
friends.
Yeah.
So really being alone in everything,
Yeah.
and then on top of that, exhaustion. Lots of people get antidepressants when they are on the verge of a burnout or actually in a burnout. And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is not depression. It's you have depressed thoughts where you don't want to face the world anymore, but that's because of
Yeah.
sheer exhaustion. It's not
Yeah.
depression itself. So you will
Yeah.
not fix it with
Yeah.
antidepressants. It's just suppressing
Exactly. Yeah,
your.
I'm a big fan of that too. And again, I really don't want to speak on, I don't want to advise somebody to get off that antidepressant if they feel they need them. I personally would never want to take them. I feel like to me, again, like that is my belief that if I feel this way, our emotional bodies are so incredibly intelligent that when we feel those feelings, there is something going on. And a lot of us are highly sensitive people, like you are as well, right? You know all about that. It's like our emotions are such incredible um, parameters. They're such incredible tools to see that if something's out of balance. It's an encouragement to go in and see what's not working. What do we need to do to change it? What can we do? What do we need? Um, it's just not what society supports us in, right? It's so much easier to uh, push a pill and then fix the problem, not have to look at it anymore. But it's a lifelong journey, in my opinion. And for me, that was very much shown that way. Um, yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like, compared to who I was back then to now, my emotional resilience is like, it's uncomparable to
Mhm.
having thrown through all of this, like there was, like I said, there was so much going on. And as that psychiatrist said, you're doing the work, you're doing what you need to do, you're looking for solutions, you're trying to get counseling, you're trying to do this, you're trying to do that. Um, it was what I needed to do. For myself, I mean, I knew all along, and this in this early stage, this was in the first year or two of my son's life, year and a half. I knew all along that it's unlikely that this relationship is going to turn around to the point where we are a happy married couple.
Mhm.
Um, there was a lot of different lifestyles, the way we live life, different beliefs, and there was just a lot of this going on, just a lot of like
Yes.
what I've also
Mhm.
noticed when you have a child, all of a sudden everything matters exponentially. If you're just two people living together, you can disagree on something. It's not comfortable, but it's not the end of the world. But when it's all of a sudden affecting your offspring, there's something really primal in there that
It's norms
clicks.
and values, right? It's what norms
Yes,
and values am I
yes,
going to teach my
yes,
child? And when
yes.
his norms and values are here and yours are there, and they're
That's right.
sort of polar opposite,
Yeah, yeah,
and you cannot find a common ground in
yeah,
it,
yeah. It
what
was
are you
very
going to teach
challenging.
your child?
Yeah, yeah. And my son's dad was also really managing his own anxieties. I don't want to speak too much on his own behalf, but um, at the time, I can say that he was very much soothing his own anxieties and stress with using marijuana very, very intensely, to the point when he was on it, he was okay. As soon as he was coming down from it, we ended up in a fight, and it was really irrational, and it was
Mhm.
really difficult. And I remember being in one of those talks at the hospital where the nurses were talking about when you are in a relationship with somebody who constantly I can't remember the wording they used, but soothes something through addiction or through a habit or through medicine, you are not actually in a relationship. And that really struck me. And also for me, I have to say, there's a part of me, and I knew this since I was a very young woman, that has this real desire for a really, really good, deep, deep, meaningful relationship.
Mhm.
And I was never somebody who could just check out and say, well, I guess he pays the bills. I guess he's okay. I
He
guess we're
doesn't hit me. He
like
doesn't hit
just
my
just sort of
child.
living
Yeah.
alongside somebody. That was never going to work for me. So yeah, never ever going to work for me. And so I knew right there and then. However, my son's dad, I felt like I needed to give it everything I could to try everything I possibly could. And this is also where, for the sake of my son, this matters. This is my son's father, and he has a right to
Both parents in
both
a happy
parents.
relationship, if that's
Yeah,
possible. Yeah.
if I can rescue it in some way or another, then let's do it. And so I made that decision after that hospital visit that I was going to do whatever I can on myself. And if
Mhm.
because I noticed that he wasn't open to things like counseling together and stuff, it wasn't working for him at the time. And but then I thought, I do understand the principle that if you're dance, like a relationship is like a dance. If you change the dance steps, the other person will automatically have to change their steps as well. So I thought, okay, I'm going to give everything I can to see what I can do. My own spiritual growth. That's where all that shifted for me, where I was like, okay, I became really involved in, I had a fantastic counselor that I saw regularly, and he was just such a lifesaver for me. We didn't talk traditional talking um, therapy. We did a lot of energetics, which is just my world, and this has really influenced the work I do now myself as a soul guide and energy worker. Because I feel like a lot of us hold these energies in our bodies, and that was the same for me. A lot of stuff was coming through, and it was just so freeing, and I became stronger and stronger. And sadly, the stronger I became, the more conflict showed up in the relationship. There was a lot of conflict. There was a lot of challenges, um, really, really big challenges and terrifying challenges, where it was not good. When my son was 3, I ended up leaving the relationship for good. It was time for me to say that's it. And then that became a whole new chapter of co-parenting. And I was again terrified because in my opinion, and what I've seen, what I've heard is that um, the law is not necessarily easy, and how to do this, who gets to the child when, and who has to pay what. And we went through mediation, and I remember this being the most terrifying thing in my life. It's supposed to be easy, but for me, what
Mhm.
I've noticed in understanding it in hindsight more deeper, there was some really deep past lifetime stuff that's come to the surface of losing power, losing control over my offspring, over my child, and that somebody else in power might be able to take that away from me, or take do things that are not the way they're supposed to be or the way I would like them to be. So it became a really scary time. And again, lots of conflict. We got to somewhat of an agreement, and we struggled along for years and years and years. And there was a real sense of I see this picture, all weapons are ready, like everybody's got their weapons drawn, and we just
Yeah.
face each other and we stare each other down and like, don't make a wrong move. And there has been a lot of conflict throughout the years, and it's been draining. It's been awful.
Mhm.
However, and this is where things again changed for me. I kept on looking at things like, as much as sometimes the reactivity took me over in the moment, and I own that. I'm no angel. I haven't always made the right choices either in the way I communicated. But then I would always reflect after, and I was like, okay, how could I have done this better next time I do this? And what it has done for me, it's brought me in touch with that feeling of power, because I felt there was something about the situation that really touched on something. I would say it was something past lifetime, where I really feared that I was losing my power.
Mhm.
And over, I tried to, inch into this situation by looking at, okay, where do I need to stand my power, regardless of what's going to happen, what's the repercussion. He was really good at being really overpowering and being really scary. And my response was to move away and to not aggravate, to tiptoe around, and it's
Self-preserve.
become such a journey. What's that?
To self-preserve. Because
Yeah,
first, I want to tell you, I have tremendous respect for you for going through all of this and coming out the way you are and the work that you're doing right now. So I really wanted to say
thank
that to
you.
you. And you bring some really great things to light that a lot of people are not aware of. And that is that you bring not only yourself to the table, but you also bring your personal experiences, your childhood experiences, but also past life experiences and things that are stored in your DNA into any situation. And it sounds very much like you were aware of these things and you were willing to work on it, to self-reflect,
Hmm. Yeah.
etc. And he wasn't. He was fleeing. He was running away from it instead of facing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's usually what people do with an addiction. And then
Yeah.
things start to go crooked, right? Where you
Yeah.
are growing, you're learning,
Mhm.
you're reflecting, you're trying, you're doing. And he, instead of going with you, also
Mhm.
learning, trying, reflecting, doing, and then maybe meeting each other somewhere, you're going in that direction. And he just hangs out here and
Mhm.
nothing really
Yeah.
changes. And it's not a matter of blaming because
Mhm.
how people are and how they act is also their journey in life.
Yeah. The beauty, Barbara, is what I have found out later on, and that's the other part of this story is, in hindsight, I don't believe that he did nothing. He did it in a very different way from me, and maybe from how you would do it, and a lot of us might do it, but
Hmm.
he wasn't doing nothing. And that's what my encouragement would be to anybody who's going through a difficult situation with a partner or a past partner, that sometimes it might look very different from the way we see it. And
Hmm.
that's really the beauty, where we can make such a difference if we try on where they might come from. And that's very difficult, especially when we're so terrified to lose our strength in parenting, and when we're afraid we might lose money or we might lose our child. And you know what? The biggest insight I've had is when it all of a sudden clicked on me, why is he so angry all the time? I realized he was terrified that one day I might just take this child and leave the country and never come back. Like, if you
Yeah.
think about it, I'm getting chills just as I'm saying that, and teary almost, because that's the same fear I had. Not that he would take my son away from the country, but the fear that my son, my way of how I can raise him would go away, that somebody would take this from me. So in a way, we were very similar in our fear, but coming from very different opposite ends. And what I've started doing over and over, and again, help with my wonderful counselor, Jonathan, who's no longer with us, but he talks to me still in the spirit world. He often held the mirror up and said, well, where are you in all this? Whatever you were pointing a finger at him, where are you in this? And so many times it helped me to really look at, okay, where are we at here? What's going on for him? What's going on for from this side? And the balance of finding I need to stand rock solid when he's coming at me with bullshit and not waver and just be rock solid and show him my own strength. And at the same time, and this is kind of something I almost feel a bit sheepish, like a little fairy sometimes. Um, every now and then, when he'd least expect it, I would drop this little morsel of grace where I would do something that would favor him, that would be beneficial to him when he'd least expect it. And I remember so many times him being so perplexed and not even understanding why I just did him a favor while we're in the middle of an argument or a disagreement. But in the end, I feel like that's what turned everything around over time, And that wasn't trying to be manipulative. It was really like, okay, I get it. And if I could, I would like to take this child and run away to the other end of the universe so you don't ever influence him again. That's a natural response too, of course. But my mature self knew that isn't fair to either one of them. But learning to find little droplets of what can I do. And in the end, this has turned everything around. So things got easier and easier by the time my son was a teenager. Still not super great, but easier. And then as he kept getting older and older, I kept getting stronger and the challenges were less, but there was still this kind of drawn weapon kind of sense was in the air. And again, every now and then a little this and that, and the maybe the favors were bigger. Like, okay, you just had a bike accident. How about my son and I go up and pick up your bike from the mountain, or you just had this going on. Can I buy one of those for you too, and stuff like that. And then those favors came back and forth. I had surgery and I couldn't drive. He offered to drive me to an appointment and stuff like that started getting more and more. And by the time my son was graduating, all of a sudden I had this, sometimes spirit speaks to me in just when I'm waking up. I was waking up in the morning and I was like, we should go out for dinner together as a family for his graduation. So I
Wow.
ran out by my son and I said, how would you feel about us all having lunch on your graduation day? And he's like, hmm.
I can imagine.
He was like, okay, I'm not sure, but sure. And so I remember sitting there having lunch and just really letting his dad talk. Mostly he just talked, and my son looking really confused at times. But I feel like that was the change of everything. And in hindsight, I think what I would think in the situation was this is my intuitive self speaking, but I believe the strongest need that my son's dad had was to have a chance to show me he's not a terrible man because nobody wants to be seen as that. And by me just allowing him to speak and hearing him and reflecting and having a normal conversation, I think that's all he needed. And he's been really supportive and gentle ever since. We actually spend Christmases together now. We just had my son's birthday, and my son wasn't really into bringing anybody else over for cake or something, so we invited his dad over, and it becomes the most normal thing. We have dinner together, we laugh together, and it makes me tearful, really, to know how far we've come. And if you would have told anyone of my people that knew me, including myself, 23 years ago, 22 years ago, I would have said, not a chance in the universe. This is going to happen. So it is possible. It might take a while, and yeah, again, as in reflection for me, this was necessary to be who I am today. I have really good boundaries. There's still room for growth, absolutely. But I'm in touch with my own strength. I know myself. I trust my intuition. I knew right off the bat that for me, it wasn't about shutting these feelings down. It was about finding something, and this something was finding my strength,
Mhm.
knowing that I can be who I am, and also finding my grace, finding the compassion for where the other person is, right?
Yes.
I don't believe anybody is just angry for no reason. There's obviously something going on the other side.
Mm. But not a lot of people can see it that way, and not a lot of people are willing to look past what seems the obvious and see, oh, but he is making an effort. It just looks like
Yeah.
something I didn't recognize or something I wouldn't be doing. And then, it
In the
sounds.
moment, yeah. In the moment when we're in that place of, I couldn't have seen that either at that moment. This is in hindsight, right? Well, my needs are met now. I'm safe now, right? In the moment, I was not. But I
Mm,
always feel sometimes, and this is also something I've learned from my wonderful counselor, that when we think we know a certain situation, a certain answer, or a certain way of, oh, he's doing X, Y, Z, try on two or three more options, If
mhm,
somebody looks like they're doing something really annoying, really stupid, really mean, try it on. Oh, what if this person is doing it because they're scared? What if that person is doing this because they're unaware? What if that person is doing it because they're, who knows, right? If you
mhm.
try on different versions of that story, it might be, we don't know. We don't know
I
until we
know.
know, you know?
Exactly. And I love how this illustrates that by how you changed and how you were willing to give him space, he also changed, and that you now have reached a point where you can spend holidays together or
Hmm.
birthdays or graduations.
Hmm.
Does it feel maybe that there could be more in the future, or is it still really a closed book?
Oh, it's a closed book for sure. And for me, this is also about um, it's about learning that we can love people in a different way, right? I
Mhm.
love and respect him deeply now as a person. I know he's not the person for me to
Mhm.
be in a intimate relationship as partners, because we have way too different views of the world. We live in different frequencies, we live in different worlds completely. But that doesn't mean that I can't have love and compassion for him and
Mhm.
respect for where he's at and what he does, and look at the things he does good in his life.
Yes.
Absolutely. But he's not my person. He was meant to be my son's
No.
father. And it's beautiful because that's another thing I didn't add to this. But the way I've raised my son was a very thin tightrope of saying, like, when he witnessed things that weren't okay, I would say, I would really make sure that the message is clear that I don't like what your dad did, but I'm not saying your dad is not okay. That was really important for me,
Distinction.
because there was this woman who did the mediation with us, and I didn't like her. I
Mm.
didn't like how she fell for his manipulation. But there was one thing she said that sticks with me, and it really is a really good advice for any parent that's co-parenting. Your child is 50% you and 50% the other parent. Anytime you say anything negative about the other parent, your child will feel that energetically in their own body. And that is such good advice, because I never wanted to have my son feel bad. And he's allowed to have a relationship with his dad. Did I
Mhm.
agree with some of the stuff his dad did or said to him or showed him? No. But my son has learned incredible people skills, like observation skills, because of that. But I always made sure that I would say, I'm not okay with what your dad just did. That's not okay. And I don't know why he did that. And it was always in a way like showing him compassion. I think if anything, I've never really said that out loud, but if anything, I think that was the biggest teacher. How do I narrate what's happening to my child? I don't want to
Mhm.
give him a sour, a bitter viewpoint of his own father. I mean, his dad did enough of stuff that my son was like not
Yeah.
like. Um, but I wasn't condoning it in a way saying like this is like horrible, your dad's horrible. It's like, okay, this was weird. It also shows him that we're allowed to make mistakes, right? That we're allowed to mess up.
And you showed him that somebody's actions and who they are two different things. So he did
That's right.
something horrible, but it doesn't mean he's a horrible person.
That's right. Yeah, we're allowed to still love people even if they make mistakes.
Yes, we're
Yeah.
allowed to make mistakes. We're allowed to learn from them, and I think it's a really powerful, really beautiful message that you can say, I can respect and honor and love the person that you've
Mhm.
become. You're just
Mhm.
not my romantic person.
No, yeah, that's crystal clear. That has been crystal clear very early on. Yeah. And that's okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. That is really okay. And then to have you raised your son in the midst of all of this as a very conscious being that can
hmm
see both sides to a coin and know there's always two stories and that the
Yeah.
truth is somewhere in the middle. It's
hmm
really beautiful.
Yeah, I feel for all parents that are in this situation, and I feel for all children who are caught in between. I think you see a lot about the ethics of a person when they are in a situation of
Mhm.
being co-parents in a separated situation. You can go
Yes.
as bad as it gets, and you can go as good as it gets. The ethics are
I think we
really,
all know the examples where the war is being fought over the backs of the children, and where one parent completely blackens the other parent, and the children
yeah,
are stuck in the middle. And
yeah,
it's like growing up in a war zone
yeah,
with
yeah.
all the, things that the children then need to heal when they're an adult.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And unfortunately, I have seen some of that in my proximity as well, and it's terrible. Yeah, it's awful.
yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing this incredibly powerful
Mm,
story because I know that a lot of people that are watching this can relate to it and are in a similar situation. So if that is you, if you
mm,
are listening, if you are watching to Claudia right now and you resonate with her story, then please share in the comments, give support, give your love, give your biggest
mm.
insight, whatever, but let her know that her talk and her sharing this was valuable to you. We would both really appreciate it. And I can also imagine that you might want to talk to Claudia or maybe explore what working together could look like. So, where can people find you, Claudia? How can they reach you?
Best on my either on my website at waterspiritessence.com, or I also have an Instagram of waterspiritessence.com, also a Facebook page, same name. Yeah, you're welcome to look me up there in any places, and I'd be happy to support you if that is something you are feeling drawn to.
I love it. If this went too fast, then no worries. I will make sure that all of the links that Claudia just talked about are included in the show notes, probably below this
Mm.
video. Could also be to the sides or above. It kind of depends on where you're catching this. I promise they will be included in the show notes. So if you feel drawn or reach out, if you want to work with her, reach out. Or if you just want to say, I applaud you and I admire your strength, then
Thank you.
reach out to Claudia. I know she will appreciate it. For today, thank you, Claudia, for being here,
Mm.
for being so open, for being so vulnerable, for sharing everything that you've shared. I have no doubt that this is going to be tremendously important and influential for lots of people that are listening. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Barbara. It's been my pleasure to be there with you as always, and happy to share. Yeah, lots of love to everyone. Bye for now.
Thank you so much. And also, of course, to you, all of my fans, viewers, watchers, listeners out there, thank you for your support for the show, for the support for the channel, for always being there. If you feel that this is an important message that more people need to hear, then you might consider sharing it with your audience, with your tribe, because you never know who needs to hear this message today. And it would also mean the world to me if you could subscribe to the channel, maybe like the video, and you will be notified for any other videos that come along, including next week's guest for the next episode of this talk show. So for today, I have nothing more to say than to both you, Claudia, and everybody watching and listening. Have an amazing rest of your day, and I look forward to inspiring you in the next video.
Thank you. Bye.